My name is Wellington Chibebe, Director, Country Office, Dar es Salaam, representing countries in Tanzania, Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi, and Kenya. That is effectively East Africa.
Thank you. And you will be with me, Stella Fuzo, from the UN Information Center, and we hope that this interview is going to be shared and communicated with our colleagues at headquarters, the UN radio, but also with the media locally. We are intending to share this information so that they can know and learn more about what our mandate is and what we are doing here on the ground. I have a few set of questions that I would like to ask you. And first and foremost, I know very well that ILO commemorated its 100 years of existence last year in 2019. And this year we have the 75 years, the 75th celebration of the existence of the United Nations organization. So very briefly, maybe can you share with us the major milestones, the major highlights of what ILO has done within these 75 years at the global level, but also within the nation in Tanzania?
Well, you correctly stated that ILO was formed 100 years ago, and we celebrated our 100 years last year. Happy that the occasion was graced by none other than the Prime Minister of the Republic of Tanzania, particularly in Tanzania, and in other countries as well. It was graced by high-level officials, including some prime ministers, showing the relationship with ILO by the constituents and the social partners. Just to also highlight that in terms of the ILO's construction or composition, it is the only tripartite UN agency which brings together workers, employers, and government. And therefore, the tripartite nature of the ILO brings in its peculiarity, and it's an institution that is in 187 member states. And you must also recall that ILO was born out of the ashes of the First World War to primarily bring social dialogue and tranquility at the workplace, and also to look at the fair treatment, dignity, adequate wages, and the 8-hour working day, and freedom of association. And this brings to the fore the fact that ILO is a normative and a standard-setting organization of the United Nations. In terms of achievements, going forward, ILO also celebrated the 100 years with the ILO Declaration, which was the centenary declaration of June 2019, and a milestone convention regarding the combat of violence and harassment in the world of work. And the declaration charted the way forward and a human-centered future of work, which we adopted last year. This declaration brings in the element of a human-centered approach and a human-centered lens, and focuses on enabling people to benefit from changes in the world of work by strengthening the institutions of work to ensure adequate protection of all workers, and by promoting sustained and inclusive sustainable growth and full and productive employment. It is also critical to note that ILO has made the following achievements. And as I said, in terms of international labor standards, ILO sets and promotes rights at work and encourages decent employment opportunities, the enhancement of social protection, and the strengthening of dialogue on work-related issues. And to date, ILO has adopted 190 conventions and 206 recommendations. And I'm pleased to highlight the fact that ILO, for the first time in history, had a universal ratification of Convention 182, which is in relation to worst forms of child labor. And this, we applaud the social partners for the universal ratification. And I think these are the major milestones in summary of the ILO.
Mm-hmm. So thank you very much for that, very, very broad analysis of the achievements of the ILO. But in Tanzania, very specifically, what achievements would you be very proud of, as the ILO director in Tanzania and the region, but in Tanzania specifically?
Well, in Tanzania, the ILO has managed to assist the partners in Tanzania, that is the government and social partners, to enhance freedom of association, social dialogue, entrepreneurship, skills development, ending child labor, among others. Particular examples are: one, the revision of the National Employment Policy for Tanzania; two, reviewing and publishing the National Strategy on Elimination of Child Labor in collaboration with Ministry of Labor, Employment, Youth, and People with Disabilities and social partners. Three, mainstreaming employment into sectorial policies and the overall development agenda. And formulation of various employment-related policies and capacity building on skills development and recognition of skills acquired through informal learning, that is recognition of prior learning. And also developing and publishing a user-friendly popular version of labor laws that is currently being used by small to medium enterprises, and strengthening the capacity of statutory tripartite social dialogue bodies as regards ratification of conventions. Tanzania, we are proud to mention that to date, it has ratified 37 conventions, including the 8 fundamental conventions as covered in the Ilo Declaration on Fundamental Principles and the Rights at Work of 1998. In the areas of youth around the country, you may find that we are doing a lot in terms of promotion of apprenticeships and industry. I think those are the major achievements so far.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. And in terms of now moving away from the conventions and the policy issues, let's look at the reality on the ground, where we have so many young people who are complaining of lack of employment. And this is not just a problem in Tanzania, it's really a global problem or a challenge where young people are educated, skilled, but unemployed. So what is ILO doing to resolve those kind of issues that are emerging among youth in Tanzania?
In Tanzania, to be specific, among the interventions, the ILO is working with the government to link training to current labor market needs, as well as tackling the skills mismatch problem. Because you may also recall that there is a lot of trainings and a lot of people being qualified out of institutions of higher learning, but those skills may not be necessarily what the industry requires. And this is the job of the ILO, together with the social partners, to ensure that there is that skills and industrial needs matching. 2 skills development programs have been initiated. One, the quality apprenticeship program in hotels operation and the recognition of prior learning, as I earlier stated. The apprenticeship program is being implemented in Zanzibar and mainland, and to date, a fully accredited apprenticeship program is in place. And this program, I can happily say that out of the trained students, it has got an employment rate of 97%, which means there has been identification of the gaps and the needs, and therefore the training targets such gaps and the needs. And also developing a national skills development policy presents a common vision of skills system that the country is aiming to build and facilitates coordinated and planned actions and reforms. This we are doing together with the institutions of skills development through our Ministry of Labor. ILO, in collaboration with other UN agencies, are implementing the Youth and Women Economic Empowerment component of the Kigoma Joint Program, which is aimed at improving the economic prospects of women and youth by influencing and addressing barriers that prevent economic growth. And to date, out of this program, 554 youth and women entrepreneurs reported increased production and income from their businesses and access to finance for small-scale investments. 1,700 entrepreneurs have developed business plans, some of which secured local government loans. And this, we are proud to say that we have done it together with our sister agencies within the UN.
I know that this is at the heart of what the UN is doing. And we also know that, reflecting on the history of work, women were not paid equally with men. What is the situation now in 2020? Are we experiencing any major changes, or how would you analyze that relationship in terms of the world of work and gender relations? And also, if you could also reflect on the payment of men and women. Welcome.
Right. As per ILO's WESO Women Study Report of 2018, women are less likely to participate in labor market than men and are more likely to be unemployed in most parts of the world. The global women's labor force participation at 49 points below the rate of their male counterparts. In addition, the global unemployment rate of women for 2018 at 6% is approximately 0.8 percentage points higher than the rate of men. Although, and altogether, this means that for every 2 men in a job, only 6 women are employed. That said, the COVID-19 crisis has laid bare the entrenched gender inequalities that plague labor markets. Building back fairer will only be possible by tackling the gender inequalities head-on during the emergence and recovery phases. Women's jobs are relatively more at risk than men, and in terms of the ILO, there is a convention of equal pay for work of equal value. And therefore, this is what we are driving at in terms of the women emancipation. And you may also find that in terms of employment policies, including macroeconomic sectoral labor market policies, these must put together the equality at the core of emergency and the recovery efforts to avoid long-term damages to women's job prospects and to build back better and fair. In summary, 4 policy priorities for a gender-responsive recovery are necessary. 1, prevent women from losing their jobs as it stands. 2, avoid premature fiscal consolidation like most countries do. And 3, invest in care work where most women are found. and focus on gender-responsive employment policies. And as ILO, we are running with Convention 190 and the other convention on domestic work, which we find that if those are addressed, the issue of women will also be addressed.
So like labor laws are becoming very popular now in terms of more people are aware of their rights, and employees are, taking their rights very, very seriously, as well as people who are employing all this stuff around the world. But I just wanted to ask you about the relationship between, seeking rights and productivity. Do you feel that as people become more aware or more conscious of their rights, they become more productive? Is there any relationship?
There is a relationship. There is a correlation between the two, because when people know their rights and they engage in social dialogue together with the employers, being presided over by authorities in the name of government, once there is peace and tranquility at the world of work, it means that productivity in general goes up. And most of the issues that come out of the workplace will be by agreement or by consensus, so to speak. That's why ILO is a champion in terms of promoting social dialogue. And if you also recall, if you go to the founding principles of the ILO, one of the key principles was to promote social justice and the foundation of lasting peace and security in society and at the workplace. So these pillars and cornerstones are critical for productivity to be enhanced or maintained.
This year, the world has experienced a very pandemic. Hello. This year, the world has experienced a very, the very devastating coronavirus disease, the COVID-19, which is a pandemic that has hit all countries across the world. And I know that ILO has really been on the lead in terms of supporting employees. How are you helping governments and employees to tackle this COVID-19? How have you helped in the past? I know, for example, for Tanzania, there's a lot that has changed already and people are going back to normalcy. But from your experience, and maybe comparing it to the region where you also supervise.
Well, you correctly put it that we are faced with the challenge of the COVID-19, but thanks to the unity within the UN system and led by our lead agents in terms of the COVID-19 pandemic, the WHO, we follow WHO guidelines together with our own internal guidelines. But for our staff, we ensure that all COVID-related safety measures are adhered to, and to this end, that served the organization very well under the guidance of our resident coordinator. And also, in terms of our social partners, we have managed to do the best we can, subject to availability of our own resources to support the partners in terms of financial support to the government, workers, and employers for improvement of social dialogue during this period and beyond, in order to take care of the likely conflict that may arise as a result of the pandemic, and particularly at the workplace. ILO engaged with the constituency, that is the ministry, employers, and the labor center, TUCTA, through Labor and Economic Social Council, LESCO, which is an appropriate tripartite body and platform for engagement in terms of resource mobilization and access to COVID as far as possible. COVID materials and guidelines collected from the Ministry of Health and WHO were also distributed. And ILO on a continuous basis is also building the capacity of the workers, the government, and the employers in terms of responses to the COVID pandemic. And in line with the preparedness after COVID, where do we go? Because we have to build back better. Yes, there's the health catastrophe or the health emergency. There's the humanitarian aspect, but at the end, we must also build back better in terms of the socio-economic responses. And in terms of our participation within the UN system, technical platform in socio-economic impact assessment on Tanzania, ILO has been able to make strategic inputs into the documents and the recommendations going forward. And in terms of ILO guidelines on prevention and mitigation of COVID at work, action checklists were widely shared in terms of what to do, management responsibilities, worker responsibilities, and also government responsibilities. It's a win-win situation, and this is our pandemic with no one to blame, and therefore we must have a common and homogeneous approach to the whole exercise so that we win together. That's our approach as ILO.
And I know you oversee a number of countries in this part of the region. So I would like you to maybe shed some more light on the experiences in the specific experiences, for example, in Uganda, in Tanzania, and how you would relate in terms of how ILO, what you have been doing with employees, but also the response from the employees, from the employers' employees in these areas, and also from government, with regards to COVID-19. Sorry.
Well, the response from governments at the onset of the pandemic was relatively uniform, and we were happy as ILO that we were dealing with well-informed authorities, well-informed worker organizations, well-informed employer organizations, and there was a lot of cooperation. And the steps that were taken were actually pleasing to note also that governments, workers, and employers did not wait for the outside world to tell them what to do. They owned the processes. And to date, we have a situation whereby, yes, numbers are going up, but in terms of the fatalities, the numbers are still very low due to the fact of the recognition of the need to own the process, to be responsible, and to be responsive by the authorities. As regards the situation and levels in the countries, I think you are well aware that the 3 out of the 5 countries we cover went through lockdowns, but we did not experience that in Burundi and Tanzania. Yes, there were steps that were taken, but there were no lockdowns per se as the other countries. But whatever happened in the countries that employed the lockdowns, the mitigating measures in terms of social protection steps that were taken, and to date, that was in agreement with the other social partners. And due to the fact that it was through social dialogue and it was through agreement, we haven't had any major conflicts. And also in Tanzania, we have been in consultation with the authorities, the government, the employers, and the workers. They were discussing and coming together and sharing common strategies in terms of stemming the likely effects of the pandemic. And to date, we are happy to say that the situation seems to be actually coming out of the trenches.
And in terms of building back better, you mentioned this before, but we have the sustainable development goals and we have the next, the decade of action, the remaining 10 years. And we all know that, yes, COVID-19 has affected, life. It's not going to be business as usual. But in terms of the goal number 8 on decent work, I don't know what you want to say. Is there anything that you'd like to say with regards to the remaining 10 years, the effect of COVID-19 and the achievement of this goal on decent work? Goal number 8, sustainable development goal number 8.
Well, in terms of goal number 8 on decent work, it was not just a goal, as it were, but it is the driver of sustainable development, because whenever we want to promote development, particularly from the angle of the world of work, this can only be done through the provision of jobs, which means stronger and more inclusive economic growth. Improved growth means more resources to create decent jobs and thus decent employment and decent living. It is also, yes, true to note that we are left with the 10 years, and given the COVID pandemic, where do we go from there? I stated to you that most of the governments the world over, and particularly in the countries of our coverage, they had very, very swift responsive mechanisms, and they had platforms or portfolios to mitigate against adverse effects of the COVID pandemic. But the COVID pandemic, to some extent, has revealed the extent of decent work deficits worldwide. And these deficits have to actually be addressed in terms of provision of social protection coverage. E.g., part-time and self-employed workers, when they were lockdowns, they found themselves with nothing to do and nothing to rely upon. And the precarious situation of many micro, small and medium enterprises, and the weaknesses of global supply chains, including the consequences of those who work across those chains, were brought to the fore. And the crisis, in so far as we are concerned, has expedited much needed reforms by encouraging numerous governments to extend social protection to uncovered groups, release liquidity constraints for SMEs, and rely on social dialogue for effective solutions. Decisions that are thrust upon societies may not last under such circumstances. They have short-term gains, but social dialogue and agreements are a cornerstone for lasting solutions. These important steps are critical towards promoting decent work. The crisis has also uncovered the huge decent work deficits that still prevail in 2020, and showing that most workers are still vulnerable. We have got working poor people in most of the countries, and therefore this has been brought to bear by the COVID crisis, and we encourage better.
Thank you very much. Now, your 1-minute message to the people who are listening and watching you, the men, women, youth, and children. Just 1-minute message that you'd like to share from ILO.
From ILO's perspective, we believe that we came through one of the worst crises after the Second World War, so to speak, but we have to build back better through concerted efforts, through social dialogue, and through engagement, so that no one is left behind. Under one UN, under the guidance of the UN leadership, and together with our governments, employers, and workers, we know where we are coming from, we know where we are, and we should be able to predict where we want to be so that we will get better.
Thank you very much.